So talk to me a little bit about the significance of being in line before the polls close and not leaving.
Woo.
Talk to me about
that. Listen, I recall when Obama ran for president, right? And people stayed on that line until they cast their vote, right? Every election should be like the Obama election.
Yes.
Right? Your vote is critical, whether you're voting for the first African-American president of the United States or you're voting against another candidate who is not just in your best interest, or for a city elected official. So, don't leave, stay on that line, cast your ballot, because it is your power, right? And as soon as you walk away, you give up your power to someone else, right? So it's critical that people stay on the line, wear comfortable shoes, bring a little snack with you, put your playlist together, meet friends with the person in front of you, behind you, just so you stay motivated to stay on that line and vote. I think it's critically important. And then I'm just going to go back really quickly about the conversation around, those that may have criminal records. Don't assume that you can't vote, right?
Absolutely.
Educate yourself about the laws in your state. Educate other people within your community and network. I think it's up to us to educate those who think they can't vote, right? What the laws actually are, because that is also a form of suppression, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think, again, I'm going to continue to say this: education, right? And execution. Educate yourself and execute. Critically important things.
Lani, if I could just add one thing to what Stacy just said. Yes. When you asked about line, you need to know when your polling stations open. Absolutely. And when they close. Because depending on where you are, if you're not in line when the polls close, you're not in line. That don't mean you can't be getting there. The poll closed at 7, then you can't be showing up at 8. You got, and if you're in line at 8 o'clock and still hadn't voted, that's fine, because you were there at 7 to vote. And they should allow you to vote if you're in place when the poll closes.
Yep.
And what you'll find that most places are going to shut the line down at that time. They're going to open at a certain time and they're going to close at a certain time. And I've seen where they go, the poll person go to that person when the time stops. It's kind of like, you know how they do in Walmart, a long line. They tell you, after this person, I'm not seeing anybody else. It's the same thing here. They're going to be like, after this person, we close.
That's it.
Yvonne,
I don't let that happen to me, Yvonne.
You don't want to be the person showing up at 7:30 and the poll closed at 7, but the line is still out the door.
That's right.
Folks still standing there, but they're not going to let you get in line.
Yeah.
And legally, they will be right. And unless you just got a generous cashier that day who got a little more time, you may not be able to get there. So again, we go back to plan your vote, plan how you're going to get there, and make sure you get there and know your times, open and close, and be in line before it closes. You can be there to 12 midnight, but make sure you're there before they shut the line down.
Yeah. And for states that have it, early voting is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Vote early.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We have a couple of good questions that are coming in through the chat.
Okay.
And so the first one is, if you're trying to get a family member to vote, but they aren't interested, or if they're not interested in voting, or maybe they've never voted before, can you all give us some examples of how you would sort of go about that conversation? How would you try to convince them to vote this time? So I'm going to start with Kendra on that.
I would convince them, and I'm going to add another category into that too. Because I've heard, folks say, well, neither or no candidate that's on the ballot seems to really be, aligned exactly with what I want them to be aligned with, right? I think that for the family members who are first-time voters or who aren't really motivated to vote, let them know that if they want to ensure that they are adding to someone who is going to be their voice in county government, on city council, in the state legislature, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, if they want to be a part of that process, know that they have to actually vote, right? And if you look at some of the exit numbers from the last, general election, there were some very close numbers that came down to individual counties in some states, right? And so if you just look at it, if you disaggregate those numbers, I think that is one way to show that numbers do add up, right? And that you have to vote your own values or vote for the person who best aligns with the type of leadership that you want to see, right? With the issues that you want someone to advocate for. So that's how I would have the conversation, or I'd start the conversation.
Okay. So Stacy, I'm going to ask you to answer the same question.
Listen, Kendra, she's a little more polished and kind-hearted than I am.
Come on, Kendra.
I'm just saying. I mean, listen, I come from a family where not voting is just not an option, right? As soon as I could walk, my parents would take me into the polling booth, right? So I know that it is my civic duty. It's just ingrained in me, right, to vote every election, every single election. But hey, no judgment, right? Some people need to find their way and get back into the voting process. I would make it simple and plain. Listen, you see what happened in Kentucky, right? And the AG, right, is someone that has power, right? And if you care about what happens from just a basic level, law and order, it's important for you to vote, right?
Absolutely.
If you care about who should be the AG that
Yes.
decides if a police officer is tried for something or not, it's important for you to vote. So, I meet people where they are, right? And I think understanding what moves folks to get them to vote is important, and to start a conversation from there. The other thing is, a family intervention, right?
Right.
Family members and friends that vote, right? Sometimes you need to circle around that one individual so they can understand how critical it is to cast your ballot.
Yeah.
So those are the two recommendations.
I guess if I was going to add anything is related to what Stacy was just saying as well, is make it personal.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what drives people. If it's their children, if it's their education, whatever it is, to me, you have to make it personal. It's kind of like, the census. We've been dealing with the census. And of course,
Right.
that's still going on as a plug for the census. Please get your family members, make sure they are getting themselves counted. And trying to get people understanding why they even need to fill out a census so your child who gets free lunch, can continue getting their free lunch. Because
Right.
if you don't fill out the census, they're going to cut the money and you may not,
Right.
you're not going to get free lunch no more. The person who's going to help make sure that you get the other benefits you want, or to help who believes in, if you have a minimum wage job and you believe that you should be making more money, who is this going to represent your interests? Well, that's not going to happen by osmosis. That comes from a vote.
That's
Whether
right.
it's at your local, state, or national level, that is driven by election. People who decide that are people who are elected. And you can only change that if you vote. So I think, like both Stacey and Kendra said, we meet people where they are. Make it personal. Have the conversation, make it personal. And depending on who you're talking to, You don't have to be as polished. You just have to tell them like it is and move forward.
Yeah.
I
So
think
one
that's
thing
a
that I
quote.
think is, go ahead,
I think
Ken.
that's a quote. The decisions don't happen by osmosis. Thank you for that, Yvonne.
That is a great quote. And the one thing I was going to say is, our strategies for talking to that family member, our tips, they might be a little different, but one thing we all agree on is what you have to have the conversation.
You gotta have.
So I
Absolutely.
think the words will find you when it's time.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So there's a different environment that we are operating in with this election. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So what are some strategies that you all have for reminding people to stay safe, or making sure that they don't forget the fact that we're in the midst of COVID-19? Anybody want to tackle that first?
That's a good question.
Tell me, as it relates to voting or just in general?
In general, about if you're going to stand in line, if you're going to be out there during early voting or the day of, make
Well,
sure that you prepare yourself and that you don't forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic.
yeah, well, I would say just take all your supplies with you. Some places I know here in Alabama, most of the states got COVID money to assist with voting, and a lot of them about protective gear, those things. I know in Alabama, even though right now we're in a statewide mask mandate, they're not making it mandatory that you wear a mask to go into the polling place. Okay, so you need to be prepared for yourself. However, you think that you normally would prepare for that, then that's what you do. Let me also add right now, if you're majorly concerned about COVID issues, go on and vote early. Most places, when now there's not a long line. It's not going to be a lot of people. So you can use this season to plan when you're going to go vote. So rather than standing in line with another 1,000 people, right up on each other, you can actually go now and vote, or you can vote by mail or vote by absentee. There are a lot of ways in which you can vote in the middle of COVID and still stay safe. You can still stay safe. But if you're online that day, have your gloves if you feel like you need gloves. Have your sanitizer. Take your own pen. Just do all those things that you feel like you need to do for you to stay safe if you're going to go that day.
I agree. I agree with Yvonne. And I'll just add just a little bit more. And then I'm sure Kendra has like a Bible that she'll add to the conversation. Listen, we're all responsible adults, right? And when I go out, listen, I'm on it when it comes to my mask. I grab my mask and my hand sanitizer, and those are just the daily things I do now as part of my life, right? But when I walk down the street, I realize some people don't have masks for a number of reasons. It could be they just can't afford it, right? So here is where I put out a call to action to the Hampton Alumni Association. We as responsible adults who can afford masks, if you have the capacity to volunteer your time for maybe like an hour, go to a polling site with a handful of masks and hand them out to folks, right? I think we as an association need to figure out smart ways to keep people safe and engaged. And if we have the ability to volunteer our time as a poll worker or someone just outside giving masks to people, that helps the collective.
Good point.
I completely agree with what Stacy and Yvonne have said. I would also add, if you have children and, they have to come with you, plan accordingly for them as well. Maybe don't bring as many drinks with them that day so that they don't have to go to the restroom. My daughter is 5. She barely fits in her stroller, but we're going to have a stroller that day, right?
There you go.
And I'm going to pack everything in it that I need to have, snacks and everything. And so I just think that making that plan, having masks and having extra, I think that is definitely the way for you to go. Make sure that your battery is charged up. If you have an extra one, or if you have a little battery pack, take that with you. Because if you see something that you want to make a call to the election protection line, right, you're going to want to have enough battery so that you can do that. So those are some of the things that I would say, but especially for those who have children, plan accordingly for them as well. So.
Yep. And then I'll add one more thing. I know here in New York, myself and some Hampton alum, we are trying to mobilize to pick up ballots from seniors so they don't have to go to the polls, right? So again, innovative ways to keep people safe and also exercise their right to vote.